In just a moment, we're going to take the Torahs out of the ark and place them in a way that you can see them to the extent that we can, and let you learn a little bit about the history of each of the scrolls that we have. I wish we could dance, but we can certainly sing. As we take the scrolls from the ark, we join in the singing of Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, Yishtachavu Lehar Kodsho. Let us exalt God and bring praise to God's holy mountain. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'yishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'yishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'yishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'yishtachavu lehar kodsho. If you would hold that for a moment, I just realized I don't have a yod. And usually we'd stand when the ark is open, but we've got lots of Torahs to take out, so we'll just keep it where it is. Now, those of you who are streaming can get a real close-up here, because Justin, our cameraman tonight, is zooming right in to this particular scroll. This scroll, and those of you who are here can go back and look up close. You can look at the archive service and see it real up close. But this service in particular, this scroll in particular, is a scroll from, of all places, Transylvania. I like to call this our vampire scroll. This scroll is a really, really neat scroll. I actually have not seen a scroll like it in any of the congregations I've been to. What makes it unique are like three really, or maybe four really interesting things. First of all, we've seen scrolls that are really tall. This is the tallest one in our community, in our synagogue. But it's written on, where did I put my notes for this one? Oh, yeah. It's written on lamb skin that's been scored very, 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 very thin. So this particular scroll, even though it's super tall, is the lightest scroll in the ark, believe it or not. It also is of a custom from Central Europe, which makes all of the letters extremely ornate. So there's little crowns and swirls and decorations on all of the letters, which makes it very, very special. Additionally, the scroll was made in the late 1800s. So this is our second oldest scroll. The first oldest, of course, is the Moroccan scroll, which we'll bring out in just a bit. So it's probably close to 100 years old. And then the final thing is that compared to the other scrolls where the parchment, to make it a singular parchment scroll, of course, there's no lamb that's this long. They stitch them together. This parchment, they have them folded under, like behind, and stitched that way, whereas the other scrolls overlap each other as they're stitched together. So I have it rolled specifically to a portion that you can read if you were up close, but you know these words well. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And this scroll has the largest version of the ayin and the daled that I have ever seen. What does that mean? When the Shema is written in the Torah, the last letter of the word Shema is an ayin. and the last letter of the word echad, which is the last word of the Shema, right? Adonai echad. The last letter of that word is a daled. And the ayin and the daled are always made larger. Why? Because ayin and daled spell aid, which is the Hebrew word for witness. So anytime you recite the Shema, you are vocally bearing witness to the oneness of God. And you can take a look when you go back out into the Oppenheimer foyer later, and you'll see this same text written in our stained glass, and we also made the ayin and the daled very large, so you'll be able to see that up close. So anyway, that is our vampire scroll, the Transylvania scroll. We're going to scroll this back up, and as we do, Yana's going to play a little... Careful. Wait. It's not. There we go. Sorry. There we go. So this scroll and the other shorter scroll were written about the same time in the same part of the world. They're probably both made in Israel. They're written on a parchment that has been prepared on both sides. And this particular scroll, it has a special meaning to HCRJ as well. Why? Because this scroll was given to us for our 50th anniversary, and it was given to us from Congregation Beth Israel. It was asked when I was here, when we were celebrating our 50th, what I thought would be a really appropriate gift for the temple to celebrate 50 years. And I said, well, we don't really have a Torah scroll that can be used with regularity that's in really good shape. The tall one is when you put it on the table, it's too big for the table, even though it's very beautiful. Of course, the ancient scroll, the Sephardic teak, which we'll look at in a moment, that scroll it's not complete, actually. It's missing the whole book of Genesis and most of the book of Exodus. So that's why it's rolled to one spot for Yom Kippur, and that's it. And then we had another scroll, which out of our you pay it forward. When we received this scroll, we gave that scroll to the new congregation Shema Kolenu. But that scroll is really there's whole sections that are faded out, but they didn't need it to be perfect. Beggars can't be choosers, right? So we had the opportunity, and Don Aaron, who's an associate member here and a member over at Beth Israel, said that he would take on the project of repairing the scroll to be kosher. And he did. The scroll is beautiful. There is not as much ornate work on this scroll or the other Israel scroll, and these both are probably about 50 years old. And this is the scroll that we most use for our bar mitzvah readings because it's very, very clean and easy to read. Again, if we're zooming in, this scroll and the other scroll compared to the Transylvania scroll, they overlap the parchment when they stitch it together. And you can see that, Mike, right? It's stitched together, it's overlapped, and it's taped up. And so that's the story behind the scroll. This is a special scroll given to us for our 50th anniversary. And if we could, I don't think we can show it very easily, but it has some really nice carvings into the top, where it's all olive wood. It's very, very lovely scroll. As we're dressing this, I'll tell you a little story about the scroll before it made its way over here. I called Rabbi Lyon during that 50th when Don Aaron said that he would get it all fixed up. And I said, the scroll had a broken, these are called Eitz Chaim. It was broken and it was just stuck in the closet. All 9 years that I was at Beth Israel, this scroll was just in the closet. I said, is that scroll still in the closet? And he goes, yeah. I said, let's take it out of the closet. So he was very, very nice of them. And finally, the newest addition to our Torah work is this beautiful belt, which Gene Pfeffer needle pointed for us just last year. And now we don't have to use a bathrobe anymore. We can use this lovely belt. So as we return this one to the ark, one more melody for Torah, and I'm going to take out our ancient teak, the Sephardic scroll, and tell its history as well.
Yumadu o milchama lo yisrael.
And this is probably the scroll that most people are drawn to when we open the ark. It is over 100 years old. In the inscriptions at the top here, where it kind of honors a certain family that donated it, it says in the Hebrew, I don't remember the exact Hebrew date, but you know how this date is. This year we have 5,781. I'd have to calculate that in my head what it is, but it was dedicated in 1901 on the English calendar dates. So the scroll might even be older than that. It's an interesting scroll, so in the sense that, remember the first one was on sheepskin. This one is on goat skin, and it's very, very soft. When you get up close, you can see that it's old. It's kind of in disrepair, but it's a very, very soft kind of parchment compared to the stiff parchment on the other scrolls. This story has a lovely history in terms of how it made its way to first the United States and then to HCRJ. This scroll was originally owned by a Sephardic Jewish family from Morocco. The scroll is from Morocco. And they were living in the old city of Jerusalem, next door to an Arab Muslim family. And before the War of Independence, it was relatively peaceful, at least in that neighborhood of Jerusalem. The owner of the scroll, the family who owned it, the Jewish family, when the war broke out in 1948, Jerusalem became divided and they fled. But they entrusted the scroll to their neighbors. The man's name was Atala, and Attallah promised to keep the scroll for them until they returned. Well, they never returned, and Attallah didn't know what to do with this Torah scroll. He was waiting for his friends to come back. So in 1957, a Rabbi, Emil Berger, was going through the old city, and I don't know how he came in touch with the family of Attallah, but Attallah, I guess, felt like Rabbi Berger's approach to faith was universal enough. It kind of echoed, I guess, his friend who was the original owner of the scroll, and so it ended up in Rabbi Berger's hands and was in New York for a long time until there was some kind of relationship between Rabbi Berger and one of the founding members of HCRJ, and it found its way into our ark. But I will say that that story is something that just kind of, things are not just by happenstance. That is the nature of our congregation. The heart and soul of our place is good relationships with our neighbors, good relationships with people of other faith. And so it is in the proper ark where its spirit continues to live through our values at HCRJ. As we return the Torah to the ark, we can scroll down in our prayer books to the adoration. We'll first say the prayer that returns the Torah to the ark. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all its ways are ways of happiness, and all its paths are peace.
למחזיקים בה בתומכך מאושר כוחך
דרכנו עם בכל נתיבותיך שלום השיבנו